Welcome back to Echo Ridge and another episode here in our Max Colonization series, where yes, I know, we're still on the same planetoid. We're getting there. In our last episode, we finished building our Pacu and Jabo aquariums, and they're working pretty nice. All the Jabos are staying fed, and we've already got a bunch of rust here. And if I click through here a bunch of times because there's so many Jabo eggs, we've already collected almost 8 tons of rust. So it's probably about time for us to build the rusty Deoxidizer, and I think that's what we're going to be doing today. First, there's a few updates I wanted to show you. The first one is I added a conveyor loader over here. You may have seen it in the last episode, it was up here. What I didn't realize at the time though is this auto sweeper would just keep picking up the Pacu fillets and sending it back into that conveyor loader to drop them off there. This conveyor loader, its only job is to take the Pacu fillets from the overflow fish that come out of the incubator and send them over here. And that way, this auto sweeper can then rack and stack them either into the fish feeder, or if the fish feeder is full, put it in this conveyor loader, which will send it off to our kitchen. This conveyor loader, as you may remember, is our rust conveyor loader. This auto sweeper will grab all the rust from this tile and put it into here. Elsewhere on the colony though, I'm going to be building another lum ranch. I was trying to see if just one ranch with 2 lums was going to be enough, but I'm not extremely happy with how much peat we are making, especially considering, remember, we're using peat to make refined carbon and the ceramic. So the more steel I make, the more peat I'm going to use. And since we started smashing up all the fossil and the eggshells and everything to start making more and more steel, the demand on our peat has gone higher. Plus we're using peat in our kitchen, and who knows what we might be using it for in the future. So I'm just going to quickly duplicate this entire process, get another overgrow going. I will split off the water from here, and I think I am going to move one of these power lines once again, so I can use this same power line here to run this ranch. And then once the overgrow is finished, I'll end up adding a couple more lums here. Easy peasy. The pod has seen it fit to give us a pretty decent Maya here, but alas, Maya is not going to be printed yet. The reason why is because I want to figure out a permanent solution to me having to manually move the dupe over. I know it doesn't take a long time, but I thought with so much excess power, maybe we just put in a transit tube access. Transit tubes being what they are, this of course is going to require a whole separate line, which is fine. I did make sure to make this large power transformer out of iridium though, because it is really close to this volcano, so I'm not sure how hot it will spike in this area. I think we're over the days of too much heat spiking because of all the temperature shift plates and all the steam, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Now, one consideration I am going to have to make is completely sealing in the pod. The reason being is because I don't want dupes in suits to jump in the tube and then bypass the suit docks. This is turning into more of a problem than it's worth. I didn't realize you can't build up over the top of the printing pod, so I'm not exactly sure where to drop this dupe off at. You know what? Never mind. We're not doing the transit tube thing. Well, I say that. We are still going to be putting transit tubes in. In fact, I'll probably put one right here, and then we'll be able to launch dupes up and down. But I'm not going to worry about it for just the printing pod itself. But the great thing about this Maya is that they are farming and rancher, plus they have some supply, so they're going to be able to carry the animal food around a lot easier. And their only negative is that they're unempathetic. So welcome to the colony, Noosh 78. With the new dupe, that brings us up to our 16th, which means we're probably going to have to put in another barracks here soon and extend the Great Hall. Now, you might be wondering about the oxygen limitation, but if you remember, I told you in the last episode I was going to expand the spawn, which I did in the background. We literally just broke into it, moved the stuff over, added the additional equipment, and whammo blammo, we're back up to a standard 30 dupe spawn. Now, the last oxygen line is not being used yet. We'll eventually get there. The last update I wanted to give you is that I've started pumping all these liquids through our water chiller. Now, right now, this thing is so backed up because, well, we just don't use that much water. But eventually, all of these ponds will be empty. I also have to empty this one. I'd like to consolidate the polluted water vent. This top one I'll probably keep open like this because it's our source of cooling for our oxygen. But this is going to take probably 1,000 cycles, so who knows. I did put in a double filtration system, and that way all the water and salt water comes up here to the desalinator, and all of the polluted water goes through the water sieve. And once it is clean water, well, it'll be able to pass right through the desalinator, so we won't have to worry about polluted water ending up in our clean water spine. With all those updates out of the way, let's get to work on some rusty deoxidizers. First things first is trying to pick a location. I'm going to use the oxygen coming out of the rusty deoxidizer, probably for the somnium synthesizer, and the chlorine I'm just going to throw back into our Megaphron farm. So it really is just a matter of what's the most convenient. Once we set it up, no dupe's going to have to get involved, so it sort of makes sense to put it as far away as possible. And I think we are done cleaning all this polluted oxygen away, so I can get rid of these. I probably better not. Who knows when we start making more messes, but I think this little area right here is going to work just fine. But before I build this, I think it'd be a good idea to show you a rusty deoxidizer setup that I've made for our Twitch channel, so let's go on a field trip. Welcome to Echosaurus Ridge. Now, some of the setups in this colony might be familiar to you because, well, it was also a prehistoric start. Because when I'm playing on Twitch, we'll often make things for science to see what's working and what's not, and it's just a great opportunity to be able to tweak designs. And in one such example is this rusty deoxidizer build. The concept's pretty simple. Our friend, the rusty deoxidizer, turns rust into oxygen and chlorine gas. As a byproduct, we'll also get some iron ore. To do that, it requires 60 watts, the rust, and a little bit of salt. And what you're looking at here is the fact that chlorine is heavier than oxygen, so it drops where we have some auto sweepers taking care of some dash salt vines, where we're then getting more salt, which we send them back up to provide for the rusty deoxidizer. The 3 pumps on the top are for our oxygen. We have an atmos sensor here to make sure there's enough pressure so that the chlorine never gets into a line that's only meant for oxygen. We're going to be doing something similar except without any of this because, well, I don't need dash salt vines on that colony, and we already have a great use for all this chlorine. In many ways, just like with the rusty deoxidizer, this colony has done a lot of prototypes for the things that I do over in the YouTube colony. Speaking of which, let's head back there now. So you'll notice with the build, we are going to be using insulated tiles, and that's because there is heat generated by the rusty deoxidizer. It's not too much at 1.13 kilodtus, but it's still something we have to take into consideration. Otherwise, you'll eventually end up overheating the buildings in here. Some quick math for you when we are looking at the deoxidizer and trying to figure out how many rusty deoxidizers we need. Well, one rusty deoxidizer can handle 750 grams per second of rust. Times that by 600 seconds in a cycle, and that gives us 450 kilos of rust per cycle. And if we remember from our jobos, each jobo is only giving us 60 kilos per cycle, times 5 jobos, or 6 in this case. How'd you get an extra jobo in there? I'm wondering if, depending on where the jobo turns into an adult, they actually popped over into the aquarium. Let me see about making this a little bit bigger. But the reason why I said all that is because we could use 2 rusty deoxidizer, especially considering we have a backstock of 216 tons of rust, but I really don't think that is necessary. So we're going to do just 1 rusty deoxidizer. So I do not think it needs to be even this big. Let's see how compact I can make this. Okay, there's a lot going on here, but I've had fun trying to make this as compact as possible. Everything here is made out of steel because, again, I plan on sealing this place up and never getting back in, so there is going to be a lot of heat in here. Now, we're going to try to keep it as cool as possible by rotating all of the rust coming out. Oh boy, now this jobo's flopping up here. But we're going to rotate that rust around, and since that rust is cool, it should help keep everything in here from overheating. For how long? We don't know. We have a conveyor receptacle that's going to bring in all the salt, which I'm going to have a conveyor loader on the outside here that dupes will be able to get to, that's going to send all that salt in. On the outside, it does not need to be made out of steel though. We'll just use iron and it'll go right through here. Now, a lot of our salt is going to be hot because we're taking some of the salt and turning it into table salt up here. So there is a storage bin that can hold salt. So there's a chance that the dupes will grab it from here. Optimally, we hope to just get the salt straight from the desalinator. Why is there a bunch of iridium here? Oh no, what did I make out of iridium? We'll just say allow manual use, select salt, and considering that the conveyor loader can hold 1,000 kilos, not even counting all the salt on the rails and the conveyor receptacle, and considering it only uses 250 grams per second, the dupes will have no problem keeping this nice and full. I say all that, but right now we have 0 salt on the colony because I keep making way too much table salt. Piercer, why are you eating an overgrow? Oh boy. And if we take a look at Noosh, who's about to have a nice salted frost bun, currently their mess table has 2,000 milligrams of table salt, but they go ahead and salt it, and it only loses 1 gram. I say all that because right now we have enough for 2,390 meals. So why don't I limit this down to, let's say, 2 kilos? So we can start storing a little bit more of that salt. Somehow, the dupes found 946 kilos worth of salt. Maybe they dropped it off before I looked? Who knows. The important thing, though, is we have salt. What is this line running here? 1100 watts. All of these pumps and some of this bottom area. The aquarium line is at 1565 watts. Okay, I'll stop being lazy and just make another line. Easy peasy. I didn't want to take a chance of something in here overloading the circuit, then all of a sudden I have to break back in here. And I'm sure we'll find something else to use with this circuit. With power in, we know where we're getting salt. This auto sweeper is also going to be picking up the iron ore once the deoxidizer knocks the rust off of it, and throwing it into this conveyor loader and then dropping it here. I could send this rail all the way over here to our storage, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, especially considering we still have 887 tons worth of iron ore. So the last thing to do is actually bring the rust in. I'm also going to snip this line for now because I don't want the whole thing starting up until I've sealed it. Now, because we're using a conveyor chute, once the rust comes in, it's just going to fall and then sit here as a debris. So I want the rail to be able to have as much area to dump all of its chill into. So I think we're going to do something like this. It's ugly, but it might get the job done. Now, you may have noticed that there's only 1 gas pump in here, and that's because I plan on filtering the gases. There's only 2 of them that are coming out, so we're going to send the oxygen where it needs to go and then the chlorine where it needs to go. But I also don't want this whole place to be vacuumed out either, because then everything in here will be much more likely to overheat. So I do want some pressure to stay. So of course, that is where our trusty Atmos sensor will come into play. I'll have it say above 1,000 grams, so whenever there's more, the pump will know to start pumping out, and I will just bring it out something like this, at least for now. And I think we're done? I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but we're gonna YOLO it. All we have to do is now seal it up nice and tight. Oh, wait a minute. Do let me put wallpaper in before I get all sorts of comments about my disregard for the drywall. Balm lilies are appropriate for this, right? They can grow in chlorine. No, I don't like that. What do balm lilies have to do with rust? Alright, we're going to be going with the mush diagonal. It sort of looks industrial, right? While the dupes are busy doing that, we can now take this rust line. Let's see, how are we going to bring this in? You know what? None of these jobos are actually going to be eating, so it might be a little bit more convenient just to put in another conveyor loader here and then hook it up just like that. So then we can get rid of this conveyor loader, and all I have to do is move the rust that's in here. If I can find it through all the mess, I'll just move that pile of rust down here. And because I need to be able to get all the existing rust from around the colony, I'll put a storage bin here, and this auto sweeper will be able to send all of that rust once the line becomes empty. Then all I have to do is deselect rust from this conveyor loader, select it on this one, and on this storage bin I'll also have it rust, but it'll be on a priority for whenever the dupes get around to bringing more rust here, it will be fine. And here comes our first shipment, and here we go. Right now the rusty deoxidizer says there's too much gas pressure in here, and that's because I haven't done anything yet with this gas pipe. Now, I'm always a fan of the gas filter, but I've had many requests in the comments asking why I don't ever use a Powerless filter. So I figured I'd highlight that for you here today, even though I'm telling you, they are not my favorite, because in my opinion, they're sort of a pain in the tuchus to be able to build, and it's just so much easier to put a gas filter in just like that. And here's what the completed Powerless filter looks like. Now, this one's a compact version, so I built one over here just for the explanation piece, but gas comes in through this line here. In this case, it's oxygen and chlorine. Well, because this loop here is circulating with just oxygen, and the way that bridges work, only oxygen can be output on this side of the bridge. So any other gas other than oxygen, or whatever gas you have in this loop, is going to bypass the bridge and go this way. Now, keeping oxygen in this loop is how the Powerless filter works. And you do that by taking the gas valve, setting it to say 1 gram. So now when oxygen comes through, the valve is only going to take 1 gram of it and send it on the output of the valve. The rest, in this case 999 grams worth of oxygen, is going to bypass the valve and head out. So yes, the Powerless filter doesn't take any power, but it's a little complicated to set up. In this case, I also had to add another bridge just to provide direction for this overflow, and that's because that line ended up in the gas reservoir, so it was an input facing an input, so the pipe didn't have direction. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below on whether or not you like the Powerless filter, or is it more complicated than it's worth. I did forget to set iron ore in this conveyor loader, and there you have it, our first iron ore being produced out of our rusty deoxidizer. Now the oxygen for now is just heading on up here because, like I said, we're going to use it for the somnium synthesizer, but because the somnium synthesizer is not activated yet, we're just venting it out here, which is not great because it's going to cause this whole area to get overpressurized. A couple of other things to keep in mind with this compact design here is the fact that one gas pump can only pump 500 grams per second, but the rusty deoxidizer is actually producing 600 grams per second. So if you're looking for maximum throughput, you'll probably want to add another gas pump. I don't care about it that much. All it means is once every little while, the rusty deoxidizer is going to stop for a second or two just for the gas pump to be able to catch back up. But you'll notice right now there's still only 1100 grams worth of pressure. It'll be a while before we get through all 218 tons worth of rust, but I'm okay with that. We're not going anywhere. The changes we made to the aquarium did help by extending the overflow of all the jawbows just a little bit. It prevented the jawbows from sort of breaking through the wall. Another issue we were having is when the aquarium didn't need any more jawbows, and when a baby jawbo would turn into an adult and pop themselves out of the incubator, they were having issues getting in here because it was only 1 tile wide. So moving the incubator and making sure there was a 2-tile gap also helped. Lastly, during this episode, you may have noticed that the population count is going up, but yet I'm not introducing you to any new dupes. In fact, I'll be printing 6 of them behind the scenes, and they're going to be our sleepy dupes for the somnium synthesizer. And don't worry, I will introduce you to them in that next episode. So that's going to do it for this episode. I'm going to do a little work in the background while I wait for the printing pod to give me 4 more dupes. So let me know in the comments below what you thought of our mini rusty deoxidizer system thing. And until next time, much love, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.